Hi, this is John Jacob Schmidt from Radio Free Redoubt and AmRRON, the American Redoubt Radio Operators Network. If you're watching this, it's probably because you're searching for communications resources to help you become better prepared in the event of disruptions in conventional communications, such as a natural disaster or a man-made disaster. AmRRON is a great resource for emergency communications, but it's not just about communications. It's about a network. Life-saving news and information could make the difference between safety and danger, even life or death. Normally, if there's an emergency developing in your community or region, you simply turn on the television or hop on the internet to get the latest updates. But during disasters, those services that we take for granted may not be available, as we've seen many times in our own country and around the world. In a communications down emergency situation, information that could be critical to your family doesn't just materialize and fall into your lap. It has to come from somewhere. It comes from people. People who are sharing information at agreed upon times, frequencies, bands, and modes, using communications gear that doesn't necessarily depend on today's power and communications infrastructure. So let's get started to see if AmRRON might be right for you. AmRRON is now a continental radio communications network with multiple volunteer radio operators in every state, Puerto Rico, and Canada. But it certainly didn't start off that way. AmRRON is an offshoot, or the other side, of Radio Free Redoubt, which is a website and podcast developed to promote the growing American Redoubt movement. It was developed in 2011 as a radio communications network to help keep the American Redoubt states connected, especially between like-minded conservative, mostly Christian, self-reliant patriots in the event of a major regional disaster. Before AmRRON was AmRRON, there was the foundational communications plan that began as the CH3 project, or the Channel 3 project, referring to the standardized and agreed upon designated channel that like-minded citizens would turn their radios to on their CB radio, FRS, Family Radio Service radios, or MRRS, that's Multi-Use Radio Service radios. This standardization is necessary in order to have the best chance of making contact with like-minded people and calling for help in a disaster situation. CB, FRS, and MRRS radios don't require a license to operate and are owned and used by the widest number of citizens. However, they are extremely limited in their legal power and range, and in some cases are restricted by antenna regulations and are designed primarily for voice-only communications in short distances. So, good radios within their limits, but very limited nevertheless. In a real-world disaster situation, it's the licensed amateur radio operators, known as hams, who do the heavy communications lifting. And outside government communications, it's the licensed hams who have a virtual monopoly on relevant news and information about a developing emergency situation. They're also critical during rescue, relief, and disaster recovery operations. So, in late 2011, AmRRON was born. It began with 5, then 10, then 20 ham radio operators. Their responsibility was to share news and information between themselves and then share any relevant news with their local areas over CB, FRS, and MRRS on Channel 3. Likewise, they would monitor Channel 3 in those bands for any reports coming from citizens in their local communities and pass any pertinent information along to other hams. AmRRON was to bridge the gap between licensed and unlicensed radio operators, widening the capabilities of networking and information sharing. Check the AmRRON.com website and look for other videos with more detailed information about AmRRON programs. A video explaining the CH3 project is being produced and should be available by the second week of January 2015. This regional communications plan was well received among preparedness-minded patriots from the beginning, and in early 2012, ham radio operators and citizens in other states outside the American Redoubt began inquiring, asking if they could join the network even though they don't live in the American Redoubt. Within 6 months, the membership in the communications network grew from 30 to 300 members. Some of these new members were also longtime members of the East Coast-based AmRRON Network, which stands for the American Preparedness Radio Network. They were like-minded and a highly skilled and dedicated network of radio operators with coverage from New England to the southern states, even across the Midwest and as far as Oklahoma and farther. The word quickly spread, and both groups increasingly enjoyed a crossover in membership and participation in each other's practice nets, and the relationship flourished. In January of 2014, the two groups merged, forming one of the largest private, non-institutional disaster preparedness radio networks in North America. AmRRON now consists of citizens, groups, and organizations across the continent, and they consist of individuals and families, preparedness and retreat groups, community preparedness networks, church preparedness groups, militias, Oath Keepers radio operators, and many, many more. And from all walks of life, including doctors, engineers, lawyers, business owners, police officers, and emergency medical personnel, pastors, teachers, housewives, construction workers, truck drivers, and the list goes on and on. This creates interoperability and increases information sharing. Plus, it creates redundancy. So if one network or group is disrupted or otherwise becomes inoperable, other networks can continue passing messages, news, information, intelligence, and reports about a developing disaster situation. Most importantly, they are patriots. They believe strongly in our deeply rooted Judeo-Christian heritage and are concerned about the direction of our country and the vulnerabilities we face as a nation. They understand that if there's any hope of helping their families, churches, communities, states, and hopefully their nation recover from a major disaster, war, or social, economic, or political crisis, we will need to have communications, news, and intelligence. We have to be able to receive information, share, and pass information, and be networked. We have to have the capability and mechanism in place to reach out to others of like mind for mutual assistance, security, support, recovery, and possibly even rebuilding. Crisis often provides an opportunity for some groups or individuals to attempt to seize liberty and constitutionally protected freedoms.
And no one will be able to be armed. We will take all weapons.
Back across the lake is when we got stopped by Coast Guard and St. Tammany Sheriff's Department and the National Guard by gunpoint. We were sitting around looking at each other and said, we just got our guns taken away from them.
They took them. And they didn't have a right to take them. They didn't have a reason to take them.
I had a .22 long rifle. My girlfriend had a .22 pearl handle revolver given to her by her grandmother or grandfather.
But Robert couldn't believe what he watched police do next to his rifle and his friend's pearl handle revolver.
I saw them smash her gun given to her by grandmother, grandfather, just against the curb. The other things that they busted up, the .22 rifle they busted up, these were police officers that went too far. We didn't have any rights. I mean, they treated us like criminals. They treated us like if we were in a third world country. New Orleans police did not have control of the city anymore. So the only plan they thought, I guess, was to take the guns away from the people.
Sometimes folks get the notion that the Bill of Rights was put in place to secure the people's rights unless a hurricane or some other disaster happens. In the past, conservative, patriotic leadership have found themselves to be victims of disasters, such as in the case of Hurricane Katrina. Just like everyone else, they were left with no electricity or running water, and were tending to their own family's needs. And although there were conservative patriot leaders and elected officials in the community and outside the area due to evacuation, they didn't have a voice. They couldn't make a stand for liberty and oppose the knee-jerk, liberty-robbing reactions of the interim policymakers because they didn't have communications. Without communications, you can't have command and control, which means you can't coordinate with other like-minded leaders to develop a response or sensible alternative solutions that truly help the community while leaving the maximum amount of liberty as possible intact. So, our like-minded patriot statesmen, clergy, community members, and others in positions of leadership will need communications support to coordinate their responses and efforts, to stand in the gap and protect their fellow citizens, protect liberty, and protect Americanism. And those leaders may need to call upon you for coordination, command and control, and mutual support of one another. They may need you to help disseminate information and put out public service announcements. AmRRON is the other side of the Radio Free Readout coin, and Radio Free Readout is politically active. So you may occasionally receive updates and information through AmRRON that are politically, culturally, or socially conservative in nature. We don't have a separate membership for just communications over there and just patriot issues over here. We believe that these are symbiotic, meaning they are mutually inclusive. But AmRRON is primarily a disaster communications network. Regularly scheduled practice nets take place all across the country, with national and regional HF nets taking place on the first and third Wednesday and Thursday of each month at a minimum, and local area nets taking place in communities across the continent somewhere nearly every night of the week. Some members of the network aren't very active, while others are very active and regularly participate in practice nets. But the majority are hardworking people with busy lives, making headway, steadily improving their capabilities and their skill sets, and participating as often as they can. With nearly 2,000 members across the nation, new nets are being added all the time, so keep checking back to see if a new net has started in your area. You can do this by going to the Scheduled Nets tab located at the top of the page at AmRRON.com. From the drop-down menu, you'll see various types of nets, such as local nets, AmRRON national nets, regional nets, and the East Coast-based AmRRON nets, which are still conducted every Sunday evening. And you might find some other nets of interest that may be great resources of information in a real-world disaster situation, or just a great place to monitor and listen, or join in and practice with your equipment. But let's say you want to look to see if there's an active net in your area, and you live 10 miles out of Sacramento, California. You can open up the local AmRRON Nets page, and you'll notice the directory is set up alphabetically by state. We've included a search box where you can search by keyword. In this case, we'll just type in California. And here we can see several scheduled nets with one that happens to be located right in Sacramento. All the information you'll need to listen in or participate will be listed right there. The Sacramento net takes place on 146.410 megahertz with a PL tone of 136.5 hertz and a minus offset, which means that their nets are regularly conducted using a repeater, and they take place on the second and the fourth Tuesday of each month at 2000 hours local or 8 p.m. Pacific. And if you don't see a net in your area, then start one. Local nets are started by folks just like you who want to practice and become proficient with their equipment, build solid relationships or friendships with like-minded people, and who want the peace of mind knowing that they won't be alone in a crisis. What's more, you'd be doing a service to your family, your group, your community, and your country. So consider joining today. It's free and it's anonymous. Simply go to the Join page by clicking on the tab labeled Join. There, you'll be able to read more about what being either a redoubter or an AmRRON operator means. But just briefly, a redoubter is simply a member saying, I stand with you and I'm out here, so don't forget about me. They want to be able to stay informed in the event of a disaster, but they may not have the skills, equipment, or desire to actively contribute as a radio operator. An AmRRON operator is a radio operator, either a licensed ham operator or a non-licensed relay. There's a lot more to AmRRON, of course, but this is just meant to be an overview. Feel free to explore the website and check out some of the resources and articles we have available. For a couple of other great resources to help gain a better understanding of AmRRON and disaster preparedness communications from the Patriots' perspective, I invite you to check out the Comms Up and Comms Up 2 videos that we produced in 2014. These are each about an hour long and were produced as docudramas. We hope you enjoy those and find them helpful and informative. We look forward to having you on board and joining us in building one of the fastest growing preparedness radio networks in the world. This is John Jacob Schmidt, out.
As ready, trained communicators, right up to the present time, radio hams have been busy every single minute. The ever-increasing group of radio amateurs who have equipped themselves at their own expense with two-way radio sets by amateurs who saw their opportunity to render a public service. and paid off for Americans in trouble.